Montana Ag Live is made possible by the Montana Department of Agriculture, MSU Extension, the MSU Ag Experiment Stations of the College of Agriculture, the Montana Wheat and Barley Committee, Cashman Nursery and Landscaping, the Northern Pulse Growers Association, and the Gallatin Gardeners Club.
Good evening. You're tuned to Montana Ag Live, originating tonight from the studios of KUSM on the very dynamic campus we call Montana State University, and coming to you over your Montana Public Television system. I'm Jack Rieselman, long retired professor of plant pathology. Happy to be your host this evening. Have a real interesting program tonight. Again, we're kind of finding the script of conservation and production ag, how they can coexist to the profit of everybody. So we're going to get into that a little bit tonight. We have a really special guest that I had to twist his arm to bring him all the way down from Helmville. And you all go to your map and figure out where Helmville is. And if you can't find it, later on in the program, we'll tell them where it is. But anyway, we'll have fun tonight. We're going to start off with kind of another special guest, but a semi-special guest, Rachel Frost.
Semi-special.
She's head of the Dan Scott Ranch Management Program here at Montana State University. It's a great program. You'll learn a lot more about it tonight. It's something that this state and actually the West really needs. Special guest, Dave Mannix. Dave is from Helmville, part of the Mannix Brothers Ranch up there. I met him this past summer on a tour, one of the most impressive tours I've ever been on. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We imported somebody from the East Coast, and we seldom do that. We have a border out there about North Dakota, but somebody from Penn State who has moved here as a retired weed scientist, Weed Society of America president a couple years ago, Bill Kern. And Bill is a guest too also this evening. And we're a little short of weed scientists this fall because Jane Mangold has taken a sabbatical, but she will be back next year. And Abby Saeed, our horticulturalist, and answering the phone tonight, Nikki Vredenberg and Merritt Emke. And folks, get those questions in. The phone number will be on the screen here shortly. But before we do anything about that, I'm going to give kind of a congratulatory thing to Dave, because the Mannix Brothers Ranch this past year was voted the Environmental Stewardship Award Program, the best ranch in Region 5, and that includes Wyoming, Montana, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, I believe. So congratulations on what I saw up there. It's well deserved. There's no doubt about it. So tell us about your ranch.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Jack, and thanks for inviting me to Bozeman. And I'm told your bride's going to give us a steak at the end of the deal. So
that's correct.
The reason we're here, right? So, so the ranch established in 1882. Early on, the first acreage was purchased from the railroad, and then homesteading after that to add to it. Largely sheep for most of the early years, shortly before the Second World War. Switched to cattle. In my father's time of managing, then we got into managing the fair timber acreage as well. So in the early years, Dad was other people managed our timber, if you will. I mean, he went to experts. When Brother Randy, went then as a forester himself. So he's been managing the timber. So the enterprises we have now, the timber enterprise, we have cow-calf program, of course, stock enterprise in the last few years, and the grass-finished beef, direct-to-consumer. So there's the enterprises, we're, like many of the ranches in Montana, right? We operate on deeded ground, but also plenty of leased ground. So our ranch is about a third deeded, about a third either state or federal, and then a third is private lease. And of those private leases, we have like 8 different private leases. I only mention that in that we are, the property owners that we deal with have a lot of different values, right? And so we're practiced, I think, it's important to us to understand the values of others. And that also, now that we're in the direct marketing, our customers also, right, have a set of values that often align with us, but often are some different, right? I might have an opinion about an endangered species, a grizzly bear or something that would be different than how one of our customers might feel about that. And so listening to others is something that we've found, is one of the drivers for our ranch.
I understand that, and that's got to be a tough job to do. I recognize that. Tell us a little bit briefly about your conservation programs there. I mean, you've got a lot of easements with various different agencies that leads to what I consider to be very productive.
So yeah, I guess, Jack, we have the conservation easements with both U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on part of the property, on the bulk of our property, but also some with our state fish and game. So that's just the conservation easement piece, and that's like bringing in a partner on the ranch, right? If we're thinking about doing some significant changes, we need to consider our partner. It's been a very good partnership, right? Frankly, I mean, we might be thinking about controlling sagebrush with fire or chemical or what have you. There's a biologist, that we can go to ask about, hey, what do you think about this? The same would be true with fisheries and those kinds of things. So we've, when I think about conservation on our ranch, what it looks like is the work we do with a lot of partners, right? A lot of partners help us, might be the Blackfoot Challenge with carcass pickup and range riding, for example, to help with predator control. It might be, the last few years we've been working with the Forest Service with some controlled burn for both sagebrush and conifer encroachment. It might be trout unlimited on stream restoration. There's many more partners I haven't mentioned, Jack, but that's what conservation looks like on our property, is taking advantage of those partnerships.
It's impressive. And thank you. From Butte, Abby, is it too late to fall fertilize in Butte? I'm thinking lawns.
I would say for lawns, I think you're cutting it a little too close. I wouldn't fertilize at this point, looking at what the weather's looking like next week. I'd say it's a little too late.
I would agree. And what about weed control in the fall? Bill, a lot of times we say try to control lawn weeds, pasture weeds, just before fall frost. Is it too late?
First I want to make it clear that I'm really a Westerner.
Oh, okay.
And that you and I have the same alma mater.
Oh, no kidding?
I think we talked about that. CSU?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're allowed here then.
Yeah. All right. This has been an unusual year, I think, weather-wise. Maybe every year's an unusual year, but it's been quite mild compared to some years. And so I would say, a lot of times people think about Canada thistle and other types of perennials. And I would say sort of the optimum time in our area is probably like early October in a normal year before a frost. But the fact here in the Gallatin Valley, in many areas we haven't had a frost yet, at least up until today, you probably could still do some good by treating for perennials.
My wife picked tomatoes today, October 22nd, in Bozeman, Montana. He picked tomatoes, and if somebody would have told me that 25 years ago, I would have given them a lie detector test, because that's just not common. Anyway, do you spray your, I know you have some knapweed up there, you're on top of it, and you've pretty much knocked the population down. Do you spray some of it yet?
So we do. Our main focus, the Seaman Ranch, has been bringing a band of sheep out for a number of years, and that's been on the bulk of our acreage where we're most challenged with the knapweed. We use the sheep. We still do use chemical on a spot spray basis, right? Trying to keep ahead of, the spot spraying.
Right.
I guess that stands for itself. So.
Okay, sounds good. Rachel, we have a question here. What is the Dan Scott Ranch Management Program?
Yeah, Jack, the Dan Scott Ranch Management Program is the name that encompasses a new major at Montana State University, and that major is in ranching systems. It's a Bachelor of Science that is offered through the Department of Animal and Range Sciences. And this degree is unique in a couple of ways. First, it's very broad-based compared to a lot of academic degrees. It's about a third animal science in the curriculum, a third rangeland ecology and management, and a third finance and business. So it gives the graduates of this program a really solid foundation in those 3 areas that are really essential to managing a ranch.
On that note, and I've never looked at the curriculum, and I should do that, then I wouldn't ask stupid questions, which I'm pretty good at. But we're talking about weeds. Do these students in the ranch management program take courses in weed science so they can manage weeds like on the Mannix Ranch or others? I know you've got some weeds. Do they take courses like that?
Not in weed science specifically, but they do take enough rangeland ecology courses and plant ID courses that they know how to identify those noxious weeds, and then they also know how to manage those weeds, particularly within a native rangeland situation, which is where they're most often managing those on a ranch.
Okay. Question from Missoula. This person would like to know if you're related to the Mannixes that deliver beef, grass-fed beef to Missoula.
Yes, that's us.
That is. Tell us a little bit how that works.
How it works? Well, so it's been an enterprise. So I think 2007 is the first we sold a few. It's grown considerably in the last few years. So we're selling product beef that we raise ourselves, right? In our case, it's a never ever product, right? There's no antibiotics nor no growth hormones, and we try to finish them. We try to have a marbled product. Now it's not prime, mind you, but we try to have a nicely marbled product. Yeah, we've had actually Missoula was our. We had some folks in Missoula that encouraged us. They said there's a need here. There's a demand, as we talked about earlier. There was a demand for it, and so we thought we had the product that would work, and so we reached out, started developing that. It's been very rewarding for 2 reasons. One, to connect with the consumer, right? That's a rewarding thing that we never experienced when we were selling commodity beef, right? Our commodity beef went to a feedlot in the Midwest and went somewhere, and we just didn't know if it was a good product, bad product, wouldn't know. When you know the people that are eating it, I think that's the best food safety thing you can do, right? To sell it to a person that you now know and shake hands with. And then the other thing, it's been great. It's probably afforded a couple of the next generation back. One thing I failed to say when I was introducing the ranch a little bit is that there's myself, 2 brothers, and our 3 wives, right? So there's the 6 shareholders of the ranch. But we have 6 of the next generation that are back. So we're really blessed with that.
You are.
But there's plenty of mouths to feed, and that direct-to-consumer beef business, that enterprise, has been a big piece of bringing bodies back, both financially, but also from it's a rewarding thing to do, right?
Yeah. Grass-fed beef fascinates me because years ago, that's all we had in Montana. When we had cattle here in the 1870s, 1880s, they were all grass-fed, and that's what we fed the miners with. Then we moved away from grass-fed beef, and now it's back. I'm curious how you get marbling in an animal that's fed grass.
So in our case, it's mostly a function of time. Obviously, quality of feed makes a difference, but we can't compete, right, with corn or grains that are higher energy concentrate. So in our case, we usually have to keep them almost a year longer through a second winter, and then go through the green season, if you will. And the best quality of feed we have goes in that class of cattle.
So you don't finish them on grain at all?
We don't, no. Yeah, so there's they've never had any grains, any antibiotics, nor growth hormones. And so time is a big piece of it, Jack. The other thing is, in our case, we find the heifers finish quicker than the steers, simply because they quit growing and will put on fat, where the steers will continue to grow. And then we've moderated the size of our cattle too, so that their mature weight is significantly less than many in the industry.
Okay. Sounds good. Moving on to Abby, we have a question here. What should they do now to winterize trees? And they don't say if they're conifers or deciduous leafy trees.
Okay, yeah, I can talk about both of those. So this is the perfect kind of time to make sure that you get, whether they're deciduous or coniferous, get a nice, really deep soaking into the root zone of those trees to set them up for a really healthy winter. We had a lot of issues this year with dieback because we had a really rough winter on our trees, especially our evergreen trees and shrubs. There was lots of desiccation and because we had such a long winter. So ways that you can reduce those types of issues are to make sure that you water those trees really well. Most of the trees' root systems are between the top 6 to 24 inches of the soil, and they are about triple that, circumference of that tree, about double or triple. So the area that you want to aim for watering is if your tree, imagine your tree is like an umbrella, that drip line where that circumference is, that's where most of the active roots are. So do a slow soak, make sure that water gets there, gets deep into that root system and really kind of saturates that, going into work, getting some cold weather coming in and a hard freeze expected. So this is the time to set your trees up for success.
Yeah, and you better do that with conifers for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Bill, I had a question here that came in last week. I'll find it eventually. Here's one. Prunella, a butte caller, wants to know what Prunella vulgaris is. I don't know why people can't use common names so we all understood what they were, but what's Prunella vulgaris?
So prunella, the common name is heelall. It's a member of the mint family. It's a perennial. It's not a common weed. It's kind of one of these plants that grows on roadsides, sometimes in lawns, maybe on the boulevard where things aren't really being taken care of. So I would say it's not really a plant that I would think you need to aggressively try to manage. It's probably not an easy plant to manage because the mints tend to be pretty tolerant of herbicides, typically the lawn herbicides that we use. It also is going to tolerate mowing quite well. So if you're really interested in eliminating it, you really have to look probably at the right herbicides choice and make that decision.
Bill, are they native or introduced?
No, I think it's an introduced plant. A lot of our mints are introduced, and they're interesting because animals, livestock don't like to eat them, and they sort of have some natural defenses. Think about catnip, things like that.
Okay. Call for both Rachel and Dave. This person from Billings says they're a fan of the TV program Yellowstone. Okay, and they want to know, do we still have range riders, cattle rangers in the state?
Range riders? Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
and livestock agents too. Do we have livestock agents in the state? I mean, you see that? No.
Like brand
we don't
inspectors. I mean, we have brand inspectors, but not.
That's probably the same thing as a.
I've never watched Yellowstone, so I don't know what they're referring to as far as the
neither
livestock agent. Yeah.
You guys are in the minority.
Right, we are.
It's pretty popular, and I won't say it's been good for Montana. It's probably been the reverse because they've shown some of the most beautiful scenery in the state, and so be it. But they do talk about livestock agents on there, and this person was curious, but I think brand inspectors is probably the correct one.
We do have governors.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I get students that come here because they want the cowboy degree at Montana State because they've seen stuff at Yellowstone. So that's got to be one of the questions I ask the students now. Are you a fan of Yellowstone? Well, this degree might not meet your expectations.
That's good. On that note, from Bozeman, this person would like to know where the students in your ranch management program are coming from. Are they native Montanans for the most part, or are they from all over the country?
Actually, most of them are from out of state. I literally have students from New Jersey to California. Actually, I have 2 students from New Jersey in the program, and all points in between. It's probably about 60% out of state, and 40% in-state, which is still a little bit surprising to me. I figured there would be more Montana kids that would be part of the program, but that number is growing. And yeah, lots of students from out of state, students that don't have any ranch experience, and they just want to move into ag and they want to become part of that industry and that lifestyle.
So,
Excuse me.
No, go ahead, Dave.
Is there an intern component to that?
There is. Yeah, I didn't get to that earlier. As part of the program, the students, once they're accepted into it, because it's a limited admissions program, we only take 10 students per year into it. And that's because we have that internship component. So for 2 summers in a row, they serve an internship on a working ranch. And that really then, those students that don't have any idea, no ranching background, that brings them back down to earth pretty quick when they spend that first summer just fencing and haying and spraying weeds and all of the rest of the hard work. But
So over the years, we've had 2 interns, both ladies, both from out of state. They've been spectacular. It's been, in our case, they came through the Quivira program.
right.
But it's been really beneficial for us.
Good.
It's, I call it slave labor. I'm not sure they think it's beneficial, but it's sure been good for our ranch. Right? Just the energy they bring, the network, right? They bring ideas from professors and other universities. It's been a good program, and I suspect this will be the same.
We hope so. Yes, I work with Quivira Coalition, and we've modeled a little bit of our internship structure after them because they do a really great job. And yeah, the interns, they bring a lot of energy. They really want to be there. They're excited to learn. And I tell them to act like 4-year-olds, to just ask a lot of questions, right? Why? That's got to be part of it. Is
Just seems
ask why you
like
do anything.
it's so important to bring new people into, whether it's ranching or production ag, trying to bring in that next generation.
Yeah, you're right, Bill. It's so important, and especially right now, employment is a big issue on ranches. It's hard for people to find labor. And I think it's not that there's no one willing to work, which is what you kind of hear all the time. It really is that we just don't know where to look for the people that want to work. And maybe they want to work, they just don't have the skills. And so if you have some patience, like I'm sure it took you some patience to work with those interns, and they probably broke a thing or two and tore a few things up maybe. But if we can have patience with them, it's sort of like raising our kids. We got to let them make mistakes. But sometimes we find the people that are the most passionate about ag are not the people that actually grew up in ag and have that background, but they have decided for themselves that they want to be part of that industry.
That's great. Have you been able to find internships for, how many students do you totally have now in the program, 20, 30?
Yeah, so we have about 35 in the program right now, but I only have about 15 out on internships, right, or that will be out on internships next summer. And yes, I've been able to find plenty of ranches. I'm still looking for other ranches because we try to do a really individual job of matching those students to the ranches so we can put them on places that match their skill, or they're willing to train them if they don't have a lot of skills. And then also let those students be in areas or on ranches that have different features that they want to know more about. So if they want to know more about being a grass-fed operation, we'd send them to a place like Dave's. So I'm always looking for more ranches because I'm sort of playing eHarmony.com between these ranches and the students, because this relationship has to last for 2 years, and it has to work for both sides. It has to work for the student to get an education, and it has to work for the rancher, like Dave alluded to, or then it becomes more work than it's worth.
Sounds like a great program to me. I don't think I'd have qualified. No comment. From Hamilton, Abby, this person is really taking a chance. They planted pear trees. One is 2 years old, and some of the top leaves have black spots on them. Is this a cause for concern? Is there something non-toxic I can put on it?
So what I would say about that, it's hard to say what it could be. There are lots of different things that have symptoms like black spots. We had a very kind of high moisture fall here in the Gallatin Valley and in southwestern Montana. And so we also had a lot of disease pressure as a result of that. So it's possible. I would recommend in this situation, one, to any of the leaves that drop to go and clean those up and get rid of them from the landscape, because any sort of kind of pathogens, your sanitation is going to help reduce that disease pressure in the future. And then second thing I would recommend is contact your county extension agent to come and take a look at that, or possibly sending a sample to the Scudder Diagnostic Lab if you still have those symptomatic leaves, to kind of confirm what exactly that is and what's going on.
You better hurry.
Yeah.
Because a couple of days from now, there are not going to be any leaves left on there.
Exactly, yeah.
Definitely. We are due for a change. And we talked about this before the program. This has been one of the most beautiful falls. I mean, what more could you ask for? And don't tell people about that. I normally tell people, and in fact, we have a question about that, and I'll get to that for Dave in a minute. But, where else in the country can you enjoy this type of weather right now? It's absolutely beautiful. And on that note, this person from Helena wants to know how you have been able, Dave, to keep the Blackfoot River Valley so pristine. And I think you can answer that.
Excuse me. So I could take a shot at it. There's many pieces of that puzzle, right? But a big piece of it was a number of years ago, the folks in North Powell chose to do a zoning, a 160 zoning. So right around the small communities, there's room for growth. But out in the ag land, 160 is the smallest. And up until COVID, that was working. Now people are willing to pay by the 160s too. But then along with that, there's been a lot of conservation easements. And those two things have gone a long ways. And there's the distance from Missoula and the distance from Helena. That's a factor in that as well. But
keep it that way.
That's a piece of the answer, Jack. I suspect there's more than that.
I think, and when I was up on your tour, I think somebody from Federal Fish and Wildlife said that there's just under 700,000 acres that exist in that lower Blackfoot River Valley. About 400,000 of them are under conservation easements.
That's correct.
And that's pretty amazing. It really is. We'll get to this in a minute, but another person wants to know, early on we had somebody talking about the increased amount of erosion in the state, and they would like to know if this has caused more tumbleweed, and I assume that's probably Russian thistle.
Or kochia.
Or kochia.
Probably more kochia than Russian thistle. There was an interesting clip last week out of Great Falls. I don't know if any of you saw that. They played it on the local news. And it showed apparently had 60-mile-an-hour winds, and there was a neighborhood that was just completely. There it is, yeah.
I didn't see that before.
Yeah, wow. That's from Great Falls, and that's not unusual. It's crazy, and I think just from maybe it's some fallow fields that aren't being managed well, but I think most of it's rights of ways and roadsides, and it's just where it just goes nuts, and nobody's doing anything about it.
Okay.
So kochia's probably number one, but Russian thistle, those are our two primary tumbleweeds.
Does any of that have to do with Roundup resistance?
I would say the short answer is no.
Okay.
We do have Roundup or glyphosate resistance in kochia, but that's going to be in farm fields, the wheat guys in the fallow part of that rotation, and this is just kochia's just going crazy, and it's not. 95% of it or more is not Roundup resistant.
Okay, thank you. A question from Ovando, and that's kind of in your home stomping grounds. They would like to know, they've heard a lot about regenerative ag practices, and are using regenerative ag practices, and if so, kind of explain what they might be?
I suppose it depends on who you're talking to, right? There could be a lot of different practices. So yes, I think we are using some. If I can recreate this conversation this afternoon with my son, knowing what we were going to talk about this afternoon, and I asked him what so the picture he tried to paint, if I can relay that from a 30,000 foot level, is that if we're talking about a waterway, we can get water from point A to point B in a canal really efficiently.
Right.
Or we can do it in a stream. Probably not as efficiently, but that stream adds a lot of value, right, that canal does not. And he's comparing regenerative practices. So a lot of regenerative practice may not be efficient as commodity production might be, but there are a lot of other values to that, right? So, the point he was trying to make is that if we're doing practices that allow for, let's just take for example, because they're prevalent in our area, big predators, wolves and grizzlies, if we're doing practices that allow for them and accommodate them on the landscape, chances are there's an inefficiency for agriculture. I mean, there's a reason that we, there's a picture that was on our ranch here just a couple years ago. There's a reason that they wiped them out a number of years ago, right? And now we're beginning to understand that, maybe that was a mistake. Maybe we need to, in this day and age with climate change, we need to manage habitat, right, for the good of all. In other words, if a habitat can handle those predators, it's probably also better for us as humans, right? Climate change with the whole carbon cycle, all of the above. So anything we can do to help that carbon cycle in general. So in our case, in some cases, it's intensive grazing, right? In some cases, it's not as intensive, but it's intentional. I like to think about intentional grazing, right? Depending on the case. We're talking about a dry landscape, right, with shallow soils. Maybe it's not as intensive grazing, but maybe it's adding fire to the landscape in some cases. In some, we've been partnering with, I say we as if it was our initiative. Blackfoot Chapter Trout Unlimited has done a lot of stream restoration, some in the valley, an exceptional amount in our valley, some on our property, which has really benefited the riparian areas, fish, and also our cattle. I mean, they're helping us with off-stream water, right? Mm-hmm. So all of those things, in my mind, are regenerative. And maybe the last point I'd like to make is the reason that regenerative is important beyond sustainable, right? Even on our ranch, we have letters dating back to 1869 from my great-great-grandfather on my mother's side, now not on the Mannix side, but on my mother's side. He came from Virginia. He wrote letters back to his family saying, you need to come out here. The resources, are inexhaustible, right? Right. And that was kind of the mindset, right, for decades, until we found out we could exhaust them, right? And it didn't matter if we were doing it with timber, with grasslands, with all of those things that are renewable, right? But they weren't being managed renewably. And so then it takes a lot of time to recognize that, and it takes more time to figure out how to continue production without degrading the resource. And so in our case, on our property we've managed, we need to do some regenerative work in order to get it back where it should have been. So that's why it's needed, and there are many practices that can be regenerative, and it depends so much on the habitat and the economic piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, one of the things that impressed me on your operation up there is the way you have cattle on a pasture for 24 to 36 hours or whatever the case may be. And those pastures are more productive now without additional fertilizer with that grazing management system than they were when you were using fertilizer and grazing them a little more intensively. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. On those irrigated lands where we're able to manage that way, we quit fertilizing, we're using less water, and the production is about, at this point, fluctuates some. This year's a great year, right? But still, and we haven't been doing it long enough to know what the long-term projection is, but in the last, say, 6 years, maybe 5 that we've been doing this, our production is about 25% more with zero fertilizer, and about, I think I'd have to ask my nephew Brian that manages that, I think 25% less water.
That's pretty impressive when you think about it.
So that's fun, right? And that's what, if the next generation can come back to that, that it's not all about dollars and cents for the next generation. If they have something that's exciting that they can work towards.
I just kind of feel like regenerative is being overused a little bit.
I think you're right. I mean, it's a hot term right
It is.
now.
It's sort of replaced sustainable, right? And everybody wants to be regenerative. It's interesting, if you go back 20 years ago, regenerative used to actually mean organic. And now it's become, the hot thing to do.
And it's not really well defined, but I think it just gets back to, as Dave was saying, just really working with nature, bringing back some of those natural processes. And how important is that now with the price of inputs going up to be able to do that through your management practices?
And a lot of it is soil management and building soil and, all the good things that come with better soil quality.
Bill, how long has it been this funny? We're a multi-generational ranch, and it's only been the last few years we've talked about soil health.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, really? Should we?
It is a hot new
It
term.
took us that long?
We have a federal agency that's in charge of soil health now.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah.
We'll have to look at-
NRCS, basically.
Oh, yeah, NRC. In fact, next week, we have the NRCS soil health specialist
Well,
as
there
our
you go.
guest.
So that's
yes.
been about 10 years, maybe, at the most,
Okay.
that they have a division that's called soil health.
All right. A question from Bozeman. This person would like to know, in that ranch management program, what are the opportunities, in addition to ranch management, that somebody that would graduate from that program could do? So you want to jump on that a little bit?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. And, I think we haven't even tapped into that yet because the program is so new. We've only been around for 4 years. We have graduated 3 students. All 3 of those are in the ranching industry. 2 of them work on ranches. One of them went back to a family ranch. But with such a broad-based degree and realizing that employers nowadays, you don't walk out of college trained to go into a specific job. You walk out with some skills and abilities, and the employers take you and then train you for whatever job. So I think this broad-based degree is really limitless to what students could walk into. And then they have not only just the experience of working on the ranch and getting those skills, but they have the experience of dealing with conflict, working with a lot of people, walking into new situations. So I think the sky is the limit for where these students could end up with this broad-based degree and the experience that comes with it.
Good answer. I agree with you entirely. Question. This person from Bozeman would like to know, what does leafy spurge look like? And I think, by chance, we have a photo of that.
Yes, we do.
If we can get that up, we will.
Yeah.
There.
So the photo on my right, the distant shot, is leafy spurge. This is actually near Whitehall. I was working with this grower trying to help manage leafy spurge, and that's sort of early June. So it gets to be 1 foot to 3 feet tall. It has very narrow, linear shaped leaves, and then it's obvious when it starts to flower, as you can see the flower on the left-hand side of the screen. And it's a member of what they call the Euphorbiaceae family, which is kind of an interesting plant family. A number of poisonous plants, and one of the things that's characteristic is it has a milky sap, and so the euphorbs tend to have milky saps, and they tend to be poisonous. It's a perennial. It's one of our long-time difficult noxious weeds that we've had here in Montana and really in the West. You said you don't really have leafy spurge problems?
Not too much on our property, but there certainly is some in the watershed. Exceptionally deep-rooted, right?
It is, and it's really persistent. Folks have used grazing, and maybe you've been involved with some grazing activity on leafy spurge, maybe, and it's typically not real successful. There's some biocontrols out there. Herbicides have traditionally been used. Tordon's the number 1 product that's used for leafy spurge, and it's still widely used. And there are, the project that I was involved was testing a new herbicide that was probably equivalent to Tordon, but not really any better, was sort of what I saw. So we're going to continue to have problems with leafy spurge, but it certainly is being managed better than it was, 20 years ago.
25 years ago, it was considered the Missoula County flower. but they've done a pretty good job over in Missoula. Jerry Marks, county agent over there, you got to give him a lot of credit.
See a lot of it along the river bottoms. If anybody does any rafting and fishing on our creeks and streams and rivers, it's usually just loaded with
Which
leafy
makes it
spruce.
so hard to
Yeah, because
manage,
it's places you can't use herbicides.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, and thank you for the photograph. It's a pretty weed.
It is a pretty weed.
So
There's some ornamentals that are
it's-
related to it.
exactly, and it's one of those kind of classic examples of an escaped kind of ornamental.
I've always stayed away from those ornamentals just because I know about leafy spurs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, a quick one for Abby. Planted garlic for 10 years, always been nice. This year they have a bunch of brown spots on the garlic pieces. Any idea what that is?
I'm not sure what it is. It's possible it could be kind of like a post-harvest kind of injury, because if there was any sort of injury at harvest, garlic is pretty sensitive to that. It could potentially be a pathogen. This might be another good one to send to
in.
the Scudder Diagnostic Lab.
You buy garlic, an awful lot of them have little brown spots.
Yes, yeah.
And I think most of that's mechanical, but
Yeah.
I'm not absolutely sure. Interesting question for Dave. You'll like this one. This came in from Lewistown. They own a small ranch in Fergus County. They're always under pressure from various agencies to do this or to do that. Any words of advice on how to judge what to do and what not to do? And that's a tough question.
Yeah, and so as far as what to do and what not to do, I couldn't tell you unless I knew what they were being asked or encouraged to do. But our experience has been partnerships work really well. So I would listen and consider, And then, I'm sure these folks have other mentors, right, that they could reach out to ponder these questions. The management changes maybe that they're being asked to make, I don't know. But we've had, it's one of the best things our ranch has done is partnering with agencies.
And you've partnered with Federal Fish and Wildlife, Montana Fish and Game. Anybody else?
Well, we're big users of the EQIP program with NRCS. We showed a clip a little bit ago of the burn on our place, and that was largely the Forest Service with the help of BLM and encouragement from us. I wanted to be the guy packing the matches, and they wouldn't let me do that. They just put me in charge of staying a long ways away. But it's been a real good tool for us, and it's a tool we couldn't have put on the landscape without them and their resources.
Something I did see there that really impressed me was your forefathers built a dam, which was the thing to do at the time.
He got a conservation award for it.
He got a conservation award for it. 70 years later, they're tearing that dam out and putting ladders in for cutthroats.
So they didn't take the dam out, right?
Okay.
Because we are using it for irrigation, so here's a shot of it, right? But Trout Unlimited helped us. We got out of the way so they could put in a fish ladder, right? So we have fish passage, right? So we still have the irrigation
That's cool.
function with our
Yeah.
reservoir. But now the cutthroat, it's mostly a cutthroat habitat. They have, access to spawning above and below the reservoir. And so those kinds of partnerships has just been, and in my mind, so my grandfather got a conservation award for water storage, right?
Right.
And now we realize, oh hell, fish got to travel here. Whoops. So part of the regenerative thing is, well, how do we address that? How do we fix that? An interesting thing, I'm tying this back in now to our direct marketing piece, right? But the same people, I don't have to love a grizzly bear. I don't have to love a cutthroat fish. But if my customers want them, maybe I ought to listen, right? That's pretty cool.
And that's a very good point, no doubt about it. Rachel, this person is a veteran, and they're curious, do veterans get preferences if they wanted to join or be accepted into the ranch management program?
We have quite a few veterans that are in the ranch management program. In fact, about a quarter of the students are in the program right now are veterans, and they are doing fantastic. Whether they come with experience or not experience, they don't need preference points. They come with life experience. They come with maturity. They come with a work ethic that puts them up above most of our students who are coming in as a typical undergraduate. So we love to get veterans into the program. They do fantastic in there. Our first veteran will graduate this May in the program, and I mean, the sky's the limit for him. And he came in without hardly any experience, but he has worked so hard, and he learns and he asks questions, and he's such a humble person that, yeah, I'm excited for him. We have another one that's a junior right now and is doing fantastic in the program. I have 2 freshmen veterans coming in. So no, they don't get preference points, but in my experience, they don't really need preference points because they're already a step above.
Good. Good answer. Thank you. This is kind of a comment here, and it's from Big Fork, and this is in response to a question from last week in reference to controlling Canadian thistle, Canada thistle. She has an anecdote where goats came down and ate the thistle patches, and they did such a good job that nothing came back this summer. Are goats that devastating on the landscape?
You know, goats have the reputation, they're browsers, and they'll sort of pick away at things. And they have the reputation of being very good weeders. You know, the challenge is that not everybody has goats, but there are outfits out there that actually lease goats for weed control. Not common, but Colorado, I hear about it a lot along the Front Range of Colorado. So if you can get some goats and fence them in an area that has thistle, I think within a year or so they'll do a pretty good job.
Bill, it would surprise me that would happen within a year. I would have thought they're more of a...
Well, I'm not saying that it'll be gone in a year. You said the next year, right?
Yeah, that's what they said.
So the next year it'll be back. So you're going to have to do it, more frequently than that. But
What would you guess, 3-4 years of managing that with grazing?
Well, I think what's going to happen is if you go in and you mow off a thistle patch, say 50% of it comes back. You mow it again, 30% of it comes back. You mow it again. And I would, it's similar. What goats are doing to thistle is like mechanical mowing. They're eating it, but they're continually doing it. So they're putting that selection pressure against that weed. And if you have them in there for 3 or 4 years, I would think you might, you could get to a point, I think, where you would be good for 3 or 4 years, and then slowly it would start to come back.
It's interesting that their experience was 1 year. That's really surprising.
Yeah, I would say would be too.
I can't remember the reference, but there's some pretty good citations in the literature about people using goats and the number you need per acre and how long you leave them in there and those sorts of things.
For a little bit of information about goats, do you realize Montana is one of the biggest goat producing? It's over in the Billings and Hardin area. There's large herds of goats, and they're being shipped to Denver area where they're used for human food in quantity down there. So it's an industry here that we don't hear a lot about. And I bet you didn't even know about that, did you, in your ranch management program?
I didn't know that we were one of the largest goat producing states. I was going to tell the caller that your biggest challenge is keeping them in, though, because if your fence won't hold water, it won't hold goats. I think so.
Yeah, they always say if you really want to use livestock to manage weeds, you should have cattle, sheep, and goats, all 3 types, and because they all have specialties. And some eat some things and others eat others. And
so cattle, sheep, goats, and not horses, right?
I don't think horses are mentioned.
Okay, let's get serious here for a moment again. From Butte, and this is a tough question, and I love to have the people that we invite on the program throw them a curve once in a while. Don't look at me like that. This is. This person wants to know the best way to get rid of Hylocamus niger. You ever heard of it?
Is it death camas?
It might be death camas, which allegedly comes from sheep droppings. He has been pulling it for 3 years and it keeps coming back. I'm not sure what it is.
So this was. You're coming at me then? Is that what you're doing?
Well, you're kind of a guest. We got to throw you a curve.
I was expecting Dave to take this one. I'm familiar with death camas, which is a pretty common plant that grows in rangeland, and it's a poisonous plant. And a lot of livestock producers are very scared of death camas.
Would it go through a sheep without damaging the sheep?
No,
though?
it's toxic to sheep.
Yeah.
I don't think anything really is. It's not poisonous to anything, but and it comes up kind of late. And it's a perennial. It's a bulb.
Yeah.
I think it's a lily. I'm trying to remember.
Carrot family, isn't it?
No.
It's an onion family, I
Oh,
think.
yeah, I think it's a lily.
So. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Because it comes up from a bulb, you know, and it gets a pretty white flower on it. I think like midsummer, and usually livestock are only going to graze it if there's not sufficient other vegetation to consume. And so typically drought or overgrazing would be where you run into problems there. But I know of sheep producers that lose sheep to that every year.
Interesting.
And it's not an easy plant to kill.
Okay, I'm going to say if they gave us a common name, we might be able to answer that question a little better. And I'm not good with scientific names of weeds. I know them by common names, as do
Well,
most
I
people.
could cheat for a minute and I could figure out a little bit more.
You can't do that. Okay. A question from Missoula. They hear a lot about hunters transporting weed seeds and having a little trouble getting through this one. You're in the block management program. It's walk-in, so you don't really have an issue with weeds being brought in by outsiders.
Yeah, not so much. We do allow people to drive in to get down game, but any access, right, could be our own vehicles, right? And any vehicle access will spread weeds for sure. It isn't a big problem for us because of the access deal with walk-in, but certainly can imagine where it would be.
Okay, yeah, that's something because we've had a couple of questions about that. Caller from Great Falls has a comment about the discussion about spots on garlic. She had the same thing happen and sent it in for study, and the question or the answer came back fusarium, and fusarium it's a fungus that attacks almost
it's possible,
everything.
Yeah.
So, a question for Abby. And we had this on last week. It's a garden carrot growing here in Bozeman, actually my garden. And 2 or 3 people emailed me and wanted to know what the little tiny carrots on the big carrot and why they're there. So there you go. Explain.
First of all, this is a magnificent carrot. So when you see kind of growth like this out of like root vegetables, it's usually something that's impeding the growth of that. So it could be like rocks, gravel. We have pests that can do this kind of damage too, where it kind of changes the growth. But I think it could be just something that got in the way of that growth, and it resulted in just more different, sections coming off of
You
this.
see double carrots quite often.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
exactly.
do.
There's something
Yeah.
got in the way, and you
rock
split
generally,
that.
yeah.
Exactly.
I suspect that's what happened there because I do have a lot of rocks in the garden.
Will you eat that carrot?
Yes, and believe it or not, it's absolutely delicious. Carrots in Montana are better than any other place in the United States because of our warm days and cool nights and the amount of sugar that's stored in these roots. And
I think garlic too.
Yeah.
garlic is excellent here.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We're getting down a little bit. We have a question from Helena, and they want to know, have you had issues, Dave, with wolves on your property?
The answer is yes, but not a lot.
Okay.
We've had 3, I think, confirmed kills over the years, and we have, we summer in wolf country, and there's the thing about predators, right? Is oftentimes with your summer loss you don't know, right? You just know how many didn't come home,
Right.
But you don't know if pneumonia got them, lightning got them, I'm up there driving around, ran over it probably, I don't know. But so we have had 3 confirmed kills. But our historic loss over the summer isn't much different than it was before we had wolves. So I think it's fair to say we haven't had significant problems. But the other thing I would like to say, if I don't overdo our time here, is that we're not all areas, watersheds, whatever, are created equal, because there are some producers that really suffer a lot.
True.
And we've been blessed in the Blackfoot, maybe with the Blackfoot Challenges, work with things like carcass pickup and other things that we just haven't had. But I can't explain why others have had it. To say that we don't have a problem doesn't mean that someone else doesn't have a real problem.
And I know they do. And by the way, I'm just going to put a plug in for the Blackfoot Challenge, which is one of the associations that help take care of and promote conservation ranching in the area. The Rancher Stewardship Alliance that we had out of the northern part of the state last week, 20 years ago, these did not exist. And as you said before the program, they exist now out of necessity. And I think that's a good point. And they do great work. So you guys that have promoted them and worked with them, I'm impressed. I really am. Folks, we're getting down to the end. I want to thank everybody. Rachel, thank you for coming again. Last time she did this program was in the kitchen. Dave, excellent. Thank you for being here. Our guest, pseudo-guest, you'll be back sometime, Bill Curran. And you, Abby, always good to have you here. Next week, soil health with NRCS. Folks, we'll see you then. Have a good week. Good night, and stay healthy.
For more information and resources, visit montanapbs.org/aglive.
Montana Ag Live is made possible by the Montana Department of Agriculture, MSU Extension, the MSU Ag Experiment Stations of the College of Agriculture, the Montana Wheat and Barley Committee, Cashman Nursery and Landscaping, the Northern Pulse Growers Association, and the Gallatin Gardeners Club.